After the long break over the summer, Volume 8 of the RWBY series is finally here, and oh boy, things are shaping up to be interesting for the episodes to come, and quite dark for the events of the RWBY series. The stage has been set, the players and pieces have taken their positions, the battle for Atlas, the war for all of Remnant begins now. But before we get into discussing the events of the episode, I will say spoiler warning for those who have not seen it just yet. I will not be showing the episode or any clips from it in this video, simply images of the episode and analyzing the events that take place. I'll leave a link in the description below so you guys can go to Rooster Teeth first, watch the episode there, and support the series that we all love. The episode itself starts off where we see an image from Cinder's past, presumably at least. We see a girl scrubbing the floor, seeming to be in poverty and forced to work at this way of life. And considering the scene shifts from this girl to Cinder as her and Neo are heading to meet Salem in the giant black whale, it is definitely implied that this girl is Cinder in her past before Salem found her, which gives an idea as to Cinder's timeline overall. In this scene, she seems like she's late teens, early adulthood type age, meaning that Salem didn't find her until possibly close to the beginning of the events of the RWBY series. That when we first see Cinder in Volume 1, she may have only been with Salem for a year or two, rather than Salem actually raising her from childhood, or finding her earlier in life and kind of grooming her to be the next vessel of the Maidens and a loyal supporter of hers. It seems like Salem found her somehow and set her on this path, so we might find out a bit more about Cinder's backstory in the coming volume, given how the volume itself starts off. But moving on to the events of the episode, we see Cinder and Neo arrive at the Grim Whale. The Grim around the whale aren't attacking them, likely because Salem can sense them coming due to Cinder's Grim arm, and they are able to safely land at the whale's landing platforms. It seems like the whale itself is more of a fortress of sorts, a carrier for Salem's forces, as there are landing platforms and hallways, doors, and seems more like a castle in and of itself that Cinder and Neo can walk freely through. We see Cinder and Neo greet Salem. Neo's a bit hesitant at first, but Cinder goes up and bows before her, referring to Salem as her queen. Salem gets up from the throne that's in the middle of the room, walks over to her, and says that when I chose you as a vessel for the Maidens, I put my trust in you. So I trust that you didn't come back empty-handed. And then Cinder presents Salem with the Relic of Knowledge. And is it kind of odd that I find how Salem reacted to this, the surprised look on her face, kind of adorable? Either like she's proud of Cinder, proud of her daughter type thing, or just maybe surprised that Cinder actually succeeded in this task. Though it wasn't actually Cinder who succeeded at it, it was Neo, but Cinder takes credit for it anyways, saying that she took it right from under Ironwood's nose, and Neo's not really too happy at that response. But then Tyrion emerges from the shadows and starts antagonizing Cinder, as he loves to do, saying that, well, it doesn't really speak much to your intelligence, it just speaks to Ironwood's lack of intelligence. And then Cinder obviously retorts, saying that, well, Ironwood beat you too, so I guess you're not that smart either. They have their little back and forth, but it also comes up that Watts was a necessary sacrifice. So presumably they think he's dead? Considering that Salem knew that Cinder was alive, that was likely due to the Grim arm still being intact on Cinder, and she probably doesn't have any way to detect Watts, considering the Seer Grim that was keeping Watts company throughout Volume 7 is now deceased. I think she has no idea that Watts is alive, though considering the Seer Grim was likely there and witnessed the fight between Ironwood and Watts, she would have an idea that he was taken prisoner, that Ironwood didn't kill him right there, though given events that we see later in the episode, Watts' execution might be coming very soon. But the question also arises as to who exactly is Neo? Because Salem and Tyrion have no idea who she is, and Cinder simply refers to her as a very useful asset, which wasn't really the agreement that Neo and Cinder had. Neo, I'm sure, thought that they were partners, that they shared a similar goal, to kill RWBY, and Neo only wanting revenge for Roman's demise, she obviously thinks that they are united in that goal. You know, we'll help each other, but now she's being referred to as a simple asset. Something that Salem remarks that Cinder just absolutely loves collecting. And then we get the reveal of her other assets. Emerald, Mercury, and Hazel have arrived. They came with Salem in the Grim Whale. I honestly didn't think they would be coming to Atlas, but with the arrival of these three, all of Salem's pieces are now assembled, and the assault on Atlas is set to begin. With Emerald, Mercury, and Hazel, though, we do see their new outfits and designs for Volume 8, and I gotta say, they look incredible. All of their new outfits, Hazel looking absolutely jacked and ready to mess up anyone that he comes across, Mercury just being cold as always, and we see Emerald, when she's first introduced, she is very happy to see Cinder, but Cinder shuts that down immediately, just tells her to be quiet, and Emerald's not really too pleased by that response. But, of course, Mercury was absolutely right back in Volume 6. Cinder doesn't care about any of them. She just sees them as pawns, as assets, and doesn't really care what they actually want. So we'll see how things play out in this volume. We know that Neo is definitely not happy with the way that Cinder's treating her. Emerald probably starting to get the idea that maybe things aren't as happy-go-lucky as she makes them out to be, so we'll see if maybe Emerald and Neo might have a team-up and abandon Cinder at some point. Maybe dragging Mercury along by force later on, or maybe he'll have a change of heart at some point, and we'll see how things play out, but I'm really happy to see these three again. Then we see Cinder exclaim that it was because of the interference of the Polendina girl that she wasn't able to get the Winter Maiden powers. But now that she knows Penny has them, it'll be very easy to take them from her when she sees her again. Salem stops her from doing that, though, saying that I gave no such order. And she places a hand on the throne, and we see the energy pulsing throughout the entirety of the Grim Whale. The throne itself does act like a control center for it, it seems. And we see that it seems to act like a giant form of a seer Grim as well, because we can see a projection of the entire city of Atlas covered in its hard light dust shield as Salem is setting up her plan to, well, start her assault on it. And Salem says at that point that just because you are more useful than a pawn, it does not make you a player. All you need concern yourself with is your ability to act when I tell you to. And this is where we see Cinder respond with, of course, without you, I am nothing. The words that we heard from the Volume 8 trailers and clips that we have seen thus far. And the final scene that we see of them in this episode is essentially the Dark Avengers assembling. All of them are ready to start this assault. Salem, Tyrion, Hazel, Cinder, Emerald, Mercury, Neo, all of them are set to go, and I'm really curious to see what tasks they're each going to be assigned and how things are going to divide up, what clashes are going to happen in Volume 8 between Salem's forces and Ironwood's forces, as well as the forces of, Team RWBY, Team Juniper as well. So a lot of interesting matchups could potentially happen with this roster of characters, and the fights are going to be insane that we will see. But we move to the next scene where we see the slums of Mantle, and this is where Oscar is currently taking refuge after falling from Atlas at the end of Volume 7. We see he's given some soup or water or something by one of the refugees there as well, and this man is quite important for the episode, or at least very notable, because he is a faunus that has bear paws. And this is pretty significant because for the first little while in the RWBY series, faunus traits were always an addition to the human traits that characters already had. There was an extra set of ears, or a tail, or claws, or something like that. But starting with Volume 7, faunus traits have started to replace the otherwise human traits that would be there. We saw this with Fiona Time and the sheep ears that replaced the human ears that would be there, and now we see that this man has bear paws and claws instead of the human hands that we are used to seeing. I'm really liking all of the different faunus traits that we are starting to be introduced to, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what other types of faunus will be introduced. But we don't get to see him for long as RWBY arrives to pick up Oscar very quickly. I'm guessing Oscar just contacted them with a scroll, told them where he was, and they were able to come pick him up. We see that Mantle is in quite the dire straits. The military is non-existent in Mantle. Grim are roaming the streets. People are freezing to death, trying to keep warm however they can, and then avoid the Grim assaults, and things are just not looking great. Oscar is regretting all of the decisions that he's made up until this point. Why did he ever think that Ironwood would listen, etc., and people are not in a good mindset right now. We see that Team RWBY and Team Juniper are taking refuge with the remaining Happy Huntresses, and the Happy Huntresses are working extremely hard to save the people of Mantle. This is quite a good contrast, I think, with Robin Hill and the Happy Huntresses versus Ironwood and the Ace Ops. The Ace Ops don't seem as functional without their leader, whereas the Happy Huntresses, even though Robin is currently missing, they are functioning extremely well. They are each capable of handling their tasks, coordinating each other as well as the civilians, and are handling the evacuation quite well, at least as well as they could possibly be doing given the states of everything going on. We also see, when everyone enters the room, the new wanted posters that are up. We see that Pietro, Maria, and Penny have been added to the list, and Crow and Robin have been removed from that list. Everyone is, of course, happy to see that Oscar is safe, and we see the interesting scene where Nora goes up to Oscar to give him a hug, and at first he's like, oh god, no, another Nora attack hug. But no, this is more of just like, thank god you're alive, I'm happy to see you hug. And he's quite happy with this, hugs her back, etc. And he's the one to notice that Crow isn't there anymore. So he asks, where is he? And they have no idea. They say that, well, we last heard he was with Robin, but since then, we just don't know. And it's also notable that Oscar is now keeping something from the rest of them. Ozpin's return is something that he hasn't told them about. He says in his mind to Ozpin that there's still some things that they need to talk about before he's ready to tell everyone that Ozpin has returned, because there would be a lot of interrogation and a lot of questions for Ozpin in general that Oscar wouldn't really be able to have the time to ask Ozpin his own questions, etc. So I'm curious to see when that conversation will take place, if it's going to be perhaps in front of Salem when Oscar gets kidnapped, because we know that Salem's going to be targeting him most likely, and, if there will be time for that conversation to take place and how it will take place. So a lot of things to look forward to from this episode. And then we see Joanna Greenleaf taking charge. I'm really happy to see more of her, and hopefully we will see more of her this volume and get a reveal of her semblance, etc., because I find the Happy Huntresses very interesting characters, especially with what they represent in Mantle. But she is taking charge, saying that now that all of you are here, we're fine giving you a place to stay, but there are people who need our help now. We need to help the people of Mantle, and she has a plan to do this. People are freezing in the streets, so before nightfall comes, we need to get them to the crater under Atlas. It's not exactly safe, but it's warm. It's something where they could at least survive the night, and with everyone together in one place, it'll be easier to defend. With just the members of the Happy Huntresses, Team RWBY, and Juniper, supposedly that being it. We don't know how many other huntsmen and huntresses are from Atlas who will stay in Mantle, or possibly deserters from the military who would help and stay to defend these people, so yeah, if they only have a small force of fighters, keeping them more centered in one place might be better, though it could also be that they would be more easy to overwhelm with the massive army of Grimm that's there, so we'll see how things play out with that. We do get a brief scene of Weiss still being a bit of a princess. As Joanna is going to leave, Weiss exclaims that, well, we're never going to sleep again, I just know it. And so Joanna says, either you're helping or you're baggage. Pretty much pick which one it is. Weiss, of course, is going to help, but she still has that bit of an heiress mentality going on, it seems. But we see also in the office that they are in that there's a picture on the wall that seems interesting. It's probably nothing, but I find that woman with the eye patch looking very similar to Cinder. Considering we are in the slums of Mantle, perhaps this is someone who was a hero of Mantle before Robin Hill, someone that abandoned her family, abandoned her daughter, possibly being Cinder, and left her to a stepmother or stepfather, or a situation where she was left in the slums, left in poverty, and made Cinder have a hatred towards Atlas, towards the world, and something like that. I'm probably reading a bit too much into that, but kind of my nature as a RWBY theorist, I suppose, but this woman does give me Cinder vibes, given the eye patch, the hair color, possibly the eye color as well, though we can't really see that clearly, and the other woman in the picture might be someone significant as well. Let me know your ideas down in the comments below. Another little thing we learned from this conversation with Joanna is that the last few episodes of Volume 7 took place on the same day that everything is taking place now. The heat in Mantle was turned off, and if it gets to nightfall, people are going to freeze to death. Now, it did seem like the heat was turned off in the middle of the night anyways, so it's probably just the same 24-hour period, but it's still all going to be within the same day. And since Volume 8 is said to be taking place over 2 days within the RWBY series, it makes sense that for the first half of the volume, a lot of it is going to be trying to evacuate Mantle and, well, also trying to reactivate Amity and get that launched up to the atmosphere. Yang wants to help the people here and now, to save the people of Mantle, but RWBY is seeing the bigger picture, that all of Remnant's in danger now that Salem isn't hiding anymore, so we need to be able to warn them all. Amity getting back up and running being the quickest way to do that. So she turns to Pietro and asks him, what would you need to be able to make it functional and get it up to the atmosphere? Pietro says that we had enough construction and enough fuel gathered that seemingly it would be possible, but there's one slight snag. We need the green light from Ironwood's terminal, either in his office or at the military compound that's at the base of Atlas. So either breaking into the military or breaking into the Huntsman Academy. Neither of which are going to be great options, and both are going to be difficult, but still that seems like the plan that they want to go with. Yang is in stark opposition to this though, saying that it essentially can't be done, and even if you were able to get the word out, there's no guarantee that help would be coming. But RWBY is persistent on her focus on all of Remnant, that everyone needs their help, which makes sense considering that there is an impending danger in the wake of Salem, and the best way to be prepared for that is to have as much notice as possible, so you can be prepared, so that Salem doesn't show up at Vacuo's doorstep and they're caught essentially with their pants down. But then Yang says something that cuts pretty deep for RWBY, that when we came to Atlas, we decided that we would stand by your decisions, but that hasn't really worked out that well for us thus far. Yang is openly doubting RWBY's ability as a leader and the decisions that she has made in the past, which frankly needed to be said. Someone had to say it, but the fact that it was coming from RWBY's sister, the person that is supposed to believe in her the most, probably cuts extremely deep. RWBY has been making decisions throughout Volume 7 and acting upon the knowledge that she's had at the time. She's been doing the best she can. However, she's also 2 years younger than everyone else, and having this burden thrust upon her is probably making her act a bit more rashly and possibly being more overconfident than otherwise necessary. She should be taking maybe a bit more time to think things through and possibly making some decisions sooner than others and handling things a bit differently. She does have potential to make a capable leader, but right now I think she needs to take a step back and refocus on some things to be able to move forward in the coming episodes and the coming volume. Ren then stands up and gives support to Yang, that the people of Mantle need us right now, but Nora stands up and supports RWBY, that everyone in Remnant is in danger. We need to help everyone. And this is where we see the episode's namesake come to fruition. The episode is named Divide, and we can certainly see a divide forming between our protagonists, something that I have been saying since we got the first preview for Volume 8, where we saw the different groups of the characters, how Yang was with Ren, Jean, and Oscar, and then RWBY was with Nora, Blake, Weiss, and Penny. And because Nora was no longer with Ren, Yang was no longer with Blake, there would have to be some sort of conflict that would arise. And these two opposing goals that each of the groups are prioritizing is leading to this divide between their ideals and what they want to accomplish. Then Jean steps in as a mediator, saying, why don't we go for both objectives? Get Amity back up and running, warn the rest of Remnant, and save the people in Mantle who need us here and now. Oscar also chimes in saying that we can still be united even while working on separate goals. We don't all have to be working on the exact same thing, which does make sense. As long as they keep their ideals in mind that they want to save everyone that they possibly can, I'd say they can still be pretty well united, though there is some conflict arising. And so most everyone does agree to go along with this plan, that they'll divide into two separate teams to accomplish both objectives, but Penny does pose one other idea. Or, let me take the Relic of Creation to Salem, and maybe she will call off the attack on Atlas. This is kind of a naive standpoint. Penny is in great turmoil right now with everything that has happened within the past 24 hours, 48 hours, whenever, that attack on Robin's rally ended up happening, which was probably within like the last 48 hours, 72 hours of this episode taking place. that she's no longer really the defender of Mantle. She still wants to protect all the people and do what she can to save them, but the life that she knew up until that point has been thrown in complete disarray. Within the past 24 hours, she has abandoned the military, the thing that she has pretty much devoted her life to up until that point. She's no longer with Ironwood. She's not really knowing what the best course of action is, so she seems to be acting a bit irrational. The fact that she said maybe Salem would call off that attack on Atlas, that maybe part is just indicative that it's not a good idea to begin with. Bringing the Winter Maiden and one of the 4 relics, the great powers in the world, straight to Salem, why would she ever call off her attack? Atlas still has a military, could still pose a threat. She would likely just kill Penny, take the Winter Maiden powers, either give them to Cinder or do something else with them, and then use the Relic of Creation on something else, thus dropping Atlas. And we did get another tidbit of information. Someone said that the moment the Relic of Creation is used to create something else, Atlas will fall, implying that just having the Relic of Creation removed from the vault under Atlas Academy will not immediately cause Atlas to fall. Only when the relic itself is applied to another task will Atlas actually drop from the sky. I think that's what it's implying, so when we see the relic removed from the vault, because it's going to happen at some point in this volume, then it won't fall immediately. Presumably, at least if I'm taking the statement at face value. Only when Salem or Penny or whoever has the relic and decides to use it, applies it to a different task, will Atlas fall from the sky. And once that does, if Penny hands over the relic to Salem, she'd probably do that very quickly. Atlas will fall, killing all of the people in Mantle, taking shelter in that crater, and all the people on Atlas anyway, so not really accomplishing that goal. But as I said, Penny is in great turmoil. She's not really thinking as rationally as she could, and might start taking matters into her own hands later on in the volume if things don't exactly go as planned. For now, though, she is kind of forcing her way to go along with RWBY so that they can go to Atlas and hopefully get that go-ahead from Ironwood's terminal so that they can get Amity launched into the sky. And she does kind of force her way onto that group because it's pointed out that, well, they would need some way to get past Atlas security, meaning that either Pietro or Penny has to go with them. And so Penny activates the Maiden Eyes and says, "I will go." Of course, no one really wants to go in opposition to a maiden, especially if Penny is implying that she's willing to use the maiden powers. I don't think that she is, but the fact that she activated the Maiden Eyes means that, more to that irrational behavior and trying to be a little bit forceful in getting what she wants. So I think she's going to possibly go off the rails later in this volume and maybe lead to her death, or Pietro's death, or even more characters being injured and not in great situations later on. This volume is going to have a lot of decisions made by characters that are going to have some dire consequences, and I think Penny might be at the center of at least a couple of them, as well as obviously the other characters of Team RWBY and Juniper, but Penny in particular being the Winter Maiden, getting the Relic of Creation, etc. Now, with everyone agreed to the plan, this is where they split up. Yang says she's going to leave and do what she can now, and this is where Pietro tosses her the keys to his shop, saying that, I've been working on some things for you. This is where she's going to get the hover bikes that we saw in the Volume 8 trailer and previews, and we also see that Blake is looking a bit concerned that Yang is not really wanting to follow the rest of her team and wanting to go off on her own. And so the groups split up, the same split that we have seen in the previews thus far. Yang with Jean, Ren, and Oscar, and then RWBY with Weiss, Blake, Nora, and Penny. And we focus on RWBY's group for this little bit here, with RWBY having some concerns that they may not be as united as they want them to be, that she hopes they're still all on the same side. We see Weiss talking with Maria, that Maria is going to get Pietro to Amity and get everything set up for when they get the green light, they can just launch Amity into the sky. But they'd still need a way to actually get to Atlas. And Weiss says she may have an idea on how to do that, but gets cut off by another phone ringing, or another scroll ringing before that happens. And it's Penny's scroll. She's getting a call from the good general, and he's speaking very coldly to her, saying that he's concerned about her, that if she only tells him where she is, he will send someone to come pick her up. And I wouldn't be surprised, especially with Ironwood's actions later in this episode, that he might just try to kill Penny and take the Winter Maiden powers to put them into Winter Schnee, because Ironwood still seems to trust Winter, but obviously wouldn't trust Penny now that she's abandoned Ironwood after getting the Maiden Powers and everything that happened there. So, yeah, Ironwood's not to be trusted at this point, but Ironwood says something after the end of this conversation, because RWBY speaks up in opposition to him, saying she's not going anywhere until you change your mind about the people of Mantle. Ironwood, of course, saying what we heard in the Volume 8 previews, that you're still worried about Mantle? Salem is going to destroy Atlas, and with it, any hope that Remnant has left, etc., etc. But he leaves off the conversation by saying, we need to get the relic and leave. That's the only way for survival. If Salem breaks through our defenses, everything that follows is on you. Ironwood putting that burden and that thought in the back of RWBY's mind, but most in particular, Penny's mind. This is something that is going to weigh heavy on her and lead to her more rash decisions later in the volume. At least that's where I think it's heading. But then we cut over to the Aesops and their solemn expressions as they are looking at the body of their leader. We see that Clover did indeed die from Tyrion's attack, and hopefully he won't be reanimated by any Grimm such as the chill that was revealed in the Grimm Child. I really don't want that to be the case. I hope that he can just rest peacefully after everything that has happened and won't witness the atrocities to come and the things that Ironwood is going to do and everything that's going to happen. This hurts to see this, but it is absolute confirmation, and now we'll have to see how Ironwood, Winter, and the rest of the Aesops move forward without Clover. We see that Ironwood did in fact replace his human arm with a new metal attachment. And we also see that Winter has some metal attachments too. Whether this is more of a metal cast for the injuries that she sustained while fighting Cinder, she's definitely not in the greatest shape. And hopefully won't start sacrificing her limbs like Ironwood did to get more functionality in them. We see that Winter is kind of struggling with her right hand as well, even though the metal cast or coating is on her left arm. Her right arm, she isn't really able to clutch her hand, so she wouldn't be able to grip a sword with the flesh arm that she has currently. If she needs it transplanted with a metal one, that would give her the functionality back, but would also start sacrificing her humanity. A little bit of a dichotomy that was formed between Penny and Winter is that Penny was acting more human even though she was completely made out of metal, and Winter was kind of acting a bit more soulless even though she was the human in that situation. If we see a bit of a dichotomy shift there, that not only Ironwood is adding more metal to his body, but Winter starts that as well, whereas Penny might in fact become a real girl, even more so than getting the maiden powers from Freya, that the Relic of Creation might turn her into a real girl in some way, shape, or form, then that could be an interesting route for this to take. One thing I do want to mention though, if this is all taking place the same day that Ironwood had his fight with Watts and Salem's forces arrived, the fight with Team RWBY and the Aesops, everything like that, how fast can Atlas do that surgery to replace Ironwood's arm with a functional metal one? You'd think that would take a little while at least to be able to connect all the nerve endings and everything like that, unless, you know, the dust capabilities and hard light dust can connect to the nerve endings very easily, that it can just sense the nerve endings and everything like that. I'd be really curious to know how the surgery is actually done, or a little bit more behind the technology, as it seems incredibly fast that they were able to replace Ironwood's arm with a prosthetic that quickly. But Winter asks Ironwood at this point what he's going to do, and he says that he will do everything he can to defend Atlas, no matter the cost. And while he's saying this, we see Councilwoman Camilla and Councilman Sleet show up and are not very happy with Ironwood, saying that you're imposing martial law, what the heck are you doing? Ironwood, like, why? And are trying to get answers from him. So Ironwood's solution, as he's saying he will do everything he can to defend Atlas, he goes up, walks out into the hallway, pulls out his pistol, and shoots Sleet in the head. Really? Is that completely necessary? Shooting the councilman like that? All he had to do was walk up, use the butt of his gun, and knock him out. It would have had the exact same result, throw him in a prison cell. What are the council people going to do at this point? The people of Atlas are going to put their faith in the military that is, you know, trying to protect them from the giant Grimm horde. A councilman and councilwoman aren't really going to do much on their own. A military general, however, seems a lot more capable at handling this type of situation. So the fact that martial law was imposed and everything like this makes sense to a certain extent, but this just shows that Ironwood has gone off the deep end. He is probably far past irredeemable at this point. He might come to a realization in his final moments, but especially after this, I really don't see him surviving until the end of Volume 8, or more accurately, the end of the Atlas arc of RWBY, if it carries over into Volume 9, etc. Ironwood, after this, is probably going to lose the faith of a lot of people. We saw the reactions of not only Councilwoman Camilla, as her co-worker was just shot dead in front of her. We didn't actually see the body, so we don't know for a fact that he's dead, but judging by the height of the shot, it was head level, and his body fell to the ground afterwards. It wasn't like he was screaming in pain or anything, so I'm pretty sure it was a headshot. We see the reactions of the other Aesops who were there to witness this. Marrow and Elm are quite shocked. Vine, it's a bit harder to tell considering he's more of an emotionless character, in general at least, but he does seem at least a bit concerned. And Harriet looks concerned as well, but when Winter looks over at her, she seems to be content with turning a blind eye to it, for now at least. I think the Aesops might realize that maybe following Ironwood's orders isn't the best path ahead of them, or the best way to achieve their goals of saving the people and doing their overall jobs, that maybe it might be best to start taking matters into their own hands. Up until this point, they have been content with taking orders and just following the lead of others, but now there might be doubts instilled, especially in the mind of Marrow, I would imagine, being the newest of the Aesops and seeming to be the one that has the more rambunctious personality, the one kind of going into opposition for Ironwood's orders. In the fight against RWBY and the Aesops, he was the one who was questioning, are we really going to slug it out like this? Like, I don't want to fight them, whereas the rest of the Aesops were already ready to go, as well as Team RWBY, so, you know, Marrow might be the first to turn, and possibly other Aesops would follow. Winter also looks quite a bit concerned at the end of this as well, but it seems like Ironwood trusts her above everyone else. So we'll see if Winter might be that final straw that ends up breaking Ironwood. If Winter starts opposing his views, then he might think that he will have lost everything, lost all hope, and start going even further off of the deep end. After this, though, we see the cut to Salem as she has the Relic of Knowledge, and we see the Grimm that we saw in the trailers. She holds the relic up to it and says, well, I have questions for you, but I need the one to show me how. Bring him to me. She tells the Grimm to do this as it's smelling the relic, so it's probably going to go after Oscar. Considering that Salem said him, it seems very likely that this Grimm is going to take Oscar. And this is where the episode ends. Not an action-packed premiere as many other seasons have been, but this one definitely sets the stage for what is to come. Everyone is taking their positions and the battle for Atlas is set to begin. We know that this Grimm that Salem is talking to, I'm just going to refer to it as like a Grimm chimera. We haven't really seen a high-detailed full-body shot of it yet, but it looks like it might be some amalgamation of other Grimms that we have seen so far, or something to that nature. We know it can likely fly, as it does look like Yang, Jean, and Ren are chasing after this thing, flying away with a body in its clutches, which is probably Oscar. It does kind of have his shape, so Oscar's probably going to be kidnapped. We're going to see how things unfold from here. I'm curious to know how things are going to unfold with the group that is going to Atlas in particular, because we know that Crow and Robin are now held prisoner there. When Ironwood was having his conversation with Winter, there was a military soldier that came in and said, the prisoners have just arrived, and Winter confirmed, Crow and Robin? Well, that's who is being kept prisoner, and likely RWBY, Nora, Weiss, Blake, and Penny are going to break them out at some point. In the Volume 8 trailer, we saw Nora taking her hammer and going to break what seemed like an electricity dust shield. Perfect for Nora, considering electricity doesn't affect her in any way, shape, or form, except increasing her own power, so she would be the perfect one to break them out, and I'm really excited to see where this volume goes. It's going to be extremely dark, there is going to be a lot of death, and probably some notable deaths. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. How did you like the premiere of Volume 8? Do you have any other thoughts that I may have missed from the episode? The picture that was hanging in the room where we saw Joanna and May. Are those two characters something that I'm just reading too much into? What are you looking forward to most from the Happy Huntresses, from the two groups handling these different objectives? Do you think that Amity is actually going to get launched into the atmosphere? I have a feeling they will succeed at that task so that Vacuo and everywhere else can be warned. I don't think we are actually going to go to Vacuo this volume, though. I know there were some people speculating that we were going to go to Vacuo, but I never really saw that that was a possibility, because that would mean leaving all the way from Atlas, first having to get past Salem's army, and then taking the time to go all the way there, warning just the people in charge, and then how would they be able to warn the rest of their kingdom, not to mention the other kingdoms? Like, going to other kingdoms at this point doesn't make sense. However, I do think we might be able to see the other kingdoms at the end of the volume. Amity will get launched into the atmosphere, the warning will go out, and we will see the people receiving the warning. We will see Beacon Academy and Glinda Goodwitch again. We will see the kingdom of Vacuo for the first time in the RWBY series. Professor Theodore and Professor Rumpel, as well as possibly other teachers, other students that are there, maybe seeing Team Coffee, Team Sun, and other characters that we saw again in After the Fall and Before the Dawn. I think we might see that by the end of the volume, but that's quite a few episodes away and a lot to happen in between then. So I really look forward to hearing your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, more analyses, more theories, etc., make sure to subscribe to the channel, join the Guild of the Eternal Flame, tweet me at Phoenix Knight 7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.